UCF started the season 1-0, and now they have a chance to add another win to their total against Sam Houston. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Charge On. As always, I'm your host, Sean Green. Before we get started, as always, a quick word from our sponsor, BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. Think you know your stuff? Get in on our $200,000 mega contest and pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of $200K. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with our over 150 slot games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Bet online, the game starts here. We're back to Thursday episode, preview episode of Sam Houston. This week, we don't have to go over the depth chart and kind of give our opinions. We really just have to talk about Sam Houston. And Nick, we had a long week last week. It was a Thursday game. Now this is feeling more like a game week. Saturday game. A little bit of a better opponent. We've been studying Sam Houston. I'll say this. We don't talk too much about our when we're doing our research. We do our own research, then we come to the pod and we talk about it. I had a lot more fun doing research for Sam Houston than New Hampshire. I don't know how it was for you, but how you doing? How you doing at the beginning of this week?
I'm doing good, or rather, I'm holding up okay. It's been a busy start to my week. Hope everybody enjoyed their week one festivities of college football. I don't know about you, Sean, but I certainly stayed on my couch from about the beginning of college game day to about 7 o'clock at night. I don't think I really left the couch much. So that's the way it should be on Saturdays in the fall. And as you mentioned, we get back into the flow here of a true Saturday game because those weekday games are always weird. They're always weird. So I'm glad we're back on schedule and we could play on a Saturday.
Yeah, no, it was definitely nice. No, I watched college football as much as I possibly could, but then I had to go to HHN, and I had it up on the phone. I was watching football on my phone at Universal, so I'm glad that they had good enough cell service in that park to be able to watch football. But let's get into Sam Houston, Nick. This is going to be a longer preview episode because there is a good chunk to talk about. This is a very interesting Sam Houston team. I will say, I have also seen comments, and I actually want to ask you this. There was a couple comments online that UCF, people that are covering the team, are making it sound like Sam Houston is better than they actually are. And we're making Sam Houston up to be just this really good team that's going to give UCF a really good game. And then if UCF doesn't blow this team out, they're frauds. I'll be honest, we're going to talk about in this episode why I do think Sam Houston is much better than New Hampshire, is actually going to be a little bit of a tough team. But when we think tough, and we're going to give our predictions later, it's not going to be like we're playing TCU week 3. It's going to be a team that might be able to cause you some fits in the game, is going to challenge you way more in certain areas than a team like New Hampshire did. But at the end of the day, it's still a Conference USA team that went 3-9 last year and is figuring out a lot of stuff this year. So I'm not getting the vibe from people like myself who are covering the team that we're trying to make Sam Houston out to be like this is an upset territory. I think we're just giving Sam Houston the credit they deserve right now. They had a really good week 1. They performed really well, and we're going to go into reasons why they are. Do you get that same sentiment, Nick, that we're kind of gassing up Sam Houston as if they're too much of a formidable opponent? And we haven't talked about it yet, but do you get that vibe?
I mean, I'm not going to speak for everybody else, but I feel like on this show, we've been saying this entire time, like, we're not going to learn much about this UCF team until week 3. So how much respect were we, in all due respect to New Hampshire and Sam Houston, how much respect were we really giving those two teams? I think why maybe that narrative is shifting a little bit is what Sam Houston went out and did in week 1. And listen, it's not like they played Rice. But for what it's worth, I think it was their first one against Rice since 1939 or something like that. They beat them pretty handily on the road. And as you mentioned, they were a 3-9 football team, and last year was their first season playing at a FBS competition. So you would expect us to have some growing pains. And if you just compare this team to New Hampshire, like even if you like just follow something as simple as the betting line against New Hampshire, I think was 41.5, right?
Yeah, 41.5, 40.5, somewhere around there.
And this game is about half that when it comes to a betting line. So this team is going to provide far more of a challenge, I guess, if that's the word you want to put it, if that's the way you want to put it, than New Hampshire is. I think maybe that's the message. And again, I haven't heard this stuff from other people. I'm speculating here that maybe that's the general message that's trying to get out is like, hey, don't think that we're just playing, or UCF rather, is playing another New Hampshire, because Sam Houston is not the team that you can just, have the quarterback play, for example, that you had last week, and you still come out and win the game 57-3. So maybe that, I think, is what's going on here right now. I mean, I've seen some things too about Sam Houston. You will dive into it here, but apparently some people I think even Chris Vanini at the Athletic, after they won the game, had said that it was one of his sleeper teams to watch in Conference USA. So I don't know. Maybe we should give him a little bit more respect as an opponent. But absolutely, I do though agree with the part of the fan base that says, this is still, at the end of the day, we should have higher standards for our team, that they should go out there and get the job done, no worries. I do agree with that.
No, and I think it's a double-edged sword. I think there's positive and negatives to both, and I want to get into the preview, but I want to make it very clear. We've been saying for weeks, and Nick, you brought it up, this season doesn't start till week 3. But we can learn a lot from the first 2 weeks. We learned, let's be real, we didn't think we'd learn anything from week 1, Nick. We learned something.
Yeah.
We learned that KJ needs to improve significantly in this second game, right? We learned that we think that this running back tandem can run over anybody. Now, granted, again, we kept saying it's New Hampshire. This is a step up. Regardless, it is a step up in competition. I think this is not the same 3-9 Sam Houston team that you all didn't even know about until they were on the schedule, but you're going to know about them this year. And we're going to get into it right now, because you mentioned it, Nick. Huge win against Rice. They were, I think, double-digit underdogs. I might be wrong on that, but they definitely were underdogs. They were the underdog going into the game. They went into Rice. You said it. Rice is not like this powerhouse team that they were just the hardcore underdogs and went in and won a game. But at the end of the day, they went in as underdogs and beat a team by 20. Head coach Casey Keeler, he's been there for 10 years. He has an 89-35 record. Again, they just joined the FBS last season. They were in the FCS for a long time. They won the FCS Natty in 2020. They were undefeated in 2021, but lost in the playoffs. And then 2022, I forgot what the record was in 2022, but 2023 they went 3-9, but they did go 3-1 in November. So they improved as the season went on. We're going to start with the offense, because I think the offense is more important in this case, as always. Hunter Watson. Nick, I watched some of the highlights. He is a dual threat. He is a type of guy that can get out of the pocket. He was their leading rusher last week. He can throw. He has a good ball. He can make some pretty good throws. He won a JUCO Natty. I think the difference in this week, and what I like the up in competition, is you have a guy that can get out of the pocket, whereas last week it was more so a guy that just really stayed in the pocket. And you're going to see a lot of those guys that are dual threat guys that can get out. So what kind of challenges does a guy like Hunter Watson potentially present? Or is it like kind of, again, not a mediocre quarterback, but a guy that can give you fits and can really test your defense early in the season?
Well, it gives you a different look. And as you mentioned, as we get into Big 12 play here eventually, you're going to see a pretty good array of mobile quarterbacks. So as we know, certain edge defenders are better at rushing the passer than they are stopping the run, and vice versa. So we saw last week, UCF didn't exactly report a sack in that football game. And I think in general, if you were nitpicking that performance, you probably would have said that the two edge guys probably didn't flash enough in that game. But again, it never really mattered. So we're going to see how they handle stopping the run in this game, because I think you're going to see a heavy dose of that from Sam Houston State. Hunter Watson, very interesting player, because from everything that I had read and had heard, I mean, they had 3 or 4 guys, I think, who could have been starting quarterback for this football team. And I don't know if Hunter Watson, I was looking at some preseason previews on Sam Houston, and his name was hardly ever mentioned. in many of these like summer scouting type deals, right? It was I think it was Noah Bauer was the one that was getting most of the pub there. But he comes in, I think it was from Western, was it what? I just had it in front of me here. Was it Western Iowa or something like that, right?
I couldn't even tell you. I know he won a natty, a JUCO natty, but I do not remember what school he
won the JUCO natty. It's bothering me right now that I just had it up in my notes and I've lost it. But I think it was like Western Iowa or Western Carolina. It was something
Sounds
Western.
Right.
Okay. I'm going to try to like find it here in a second because now it's like throwing me off. But he won the Conference USA Player of the Week this past week for his performance. I know Coach Keeler gave him a lot of praise for the job that he did, and clearly he picked the right quarterback. When you win 30-13 or 14 on the road against an opponent you haven't beat in like almost 90 years now, you picked the right quarterback. So he's going to present a little bit of a different challenge than last week did for New Hampshire for sure. So maybe you don't call it necessarily like I was saying all the time about the whole 2 cupcake things on the schedule and all that. Maybe you don't call it necessarily a cupcake like, New Hampshire was. I think they're a little bit better than maybe we thought as we looked into it. But at the same time, I don't think it's nothing too crazy. I don't think that UCF shouldn't be able to deal with. But it's still a good challenge nonetheless.
Yeah, went 16 of 27 for 229 yards and 2 touchdowns. He also carried the ball 14 times for 57 yards. He was their leading rusher. And yeah, I think it's a good, you got really more of a pocket passer last week playing New Hampshire. This week you're getting a guy that can get out of the pocket. Coach Keeler said that he considered him a gunslinger, which I don't know if that was the correct term when I tell you how many sacks Rice had. That's kind of one of my notes for the defense, and one reason why I think UCF's defense is going to have a much better week sacking the quarterback. But yeah, I think he presents a different problem early in the season for this UCF defense. Not saying it's going to be a huge problem, but it's going to show, are they ready? Are they ready to deal with a mobile quarterback? Not saying Hunter Watson is a Jalen Daniels, right? So that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is gives you a different look, gives you a different guy that you can go against and see what he can do.
Yeah. And
do you have that college? I was going to ask, do you have the college?
Do I have the what?
Do you have the college?
Yeah, I have the college. I finally located it in my notes here. Iowa Western Community College.
There you go.
So I had it flipped a little bit. So there you go. Iowa Western Community College. I will never forget it now.
For those of you that want to look him up. Also, the coach said that he likes all 3 quarterbacks. He said they have 3 quarterbacks that he likes. So yeah, everything that I read, he was like the 4th or 5th name listed, like you said, Nick. So very interesting. Let's go through kind of the running backs and the receivers. Obviously, they returned their leading receiver in Noah Smith. Didn't do too much last week. I think it was only like two catches for 12 yards or something. Didn't do too much last week. Ife Adai, he was returning from injury, had 5 receptions for 63 yards and a touchdown last week. So he's returning, giving Watson another body to throw to. The running backs, though, I found this interesting, given, again, UCF couldn't stop the run last year. Last week they did a good job, but last year they averaged 2.9 yards per carry in 2023, which is what would have been one of the worst in FBS. Their starting running back right now is John Gentry. He had 14 carries for 56 yards, so still had less yardage than the starting quarterback. When you go through all of these skill positions, Nick, and again, we're not saying any of these scare us for this UCF defense, but when you go through and see their average, run was 2.9 yards per carry last year. Their third down conversion rate was really bad, 36% last year. This is a better team, but do any of those type of players kind of scare you in terms of how this UCF defense is playing?
No. They had a lot of volume last week. I think they ran it for 46 times in that game for less than 4 yards a carry. And listen, there's always context to some of that. Like, if you run for 4 yards a carry, which I think it was just like 3.9, you do that 3 times in a row, guess what? You just got a first down.
First down.
So, there's context to some of these things, and I'm not going to I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I've watched every play that Sam Houston had against Rice, because I have not, and I don't think you have either. So there's context added to that. But I would think, though, and usually this happens in some of these FCS games, where if you come in with or not an FCS game, but in some of these games where there's definitely a mismatch there, I think you tend to see, if you come in with a game plan of, hey, we're going to try to establish the run and we're going to try to keep doing that. Like, I think you see that a lot in these types of games. So that's why, like, even though Hunter Watson had a really good performance, and then let's be honest, Hunter Watson, as we mentioned, he can move as well. I do think you're going to see a lot of those looks from this Sam Houston offense. At the end of the day, I think we both came away from last week very encouraged from the overall linebacker play. Nothing that wowed you necessarily, but nothing that made you go, ooh, what was that? And I think we had too many examples of that maybe the last couple seasons in that defense. So that was something that was encouraging. So if Sam Houston here decides to continue to pound the rock and stuff like that in this game, I do feel a lot more hopeful about UCF's chances. There's not like a special player sitting there in that running back room, but the receiving core, I think there is probably a few guys, and you kind of touched on them, that could hurt you in certain situations.
Yeah, one, I forgot to mention Quavez Humphreys. Again, we kind of mentioned deep threats on these previews, like, okay, this guy could be a deep threat. He didn't play for him last year. He had 3 receptions for 93 yards and a touchdown last week. He originally started at Butler Community College, transferred to Sam Houston last year, didn't play, but now getting an extended look, or at least had an extended look last week. So if you're going for a deep threat, he'd be your guy. And you bring up a good point. You know, when we're talking about, okay, what do you need to see out of the defense this week? What do you need to see out of the offense this week? It's really hard, like, especially last week. We were talking about, okay, what do we need to see out of KJ Jefferson or the defense to feel like we took something away? And I think when it comes to the defense, you kind of brought it up, how when you look at the linebacker play, it didn't wow you, right? No. A couple plays wowed you, but especially last season, you watch it and you're like, oh, okay, like, I think they're going to be okay.
Yeah, I'll put it like this. Linebacker is one of those positions on the field that I never feel like I need like super wow type play. I just need you to play the position. Like, it's like sometimes you can overcomplicate things with football and all that stuff. Linebacker is one of those positions I just want you to play the position. Just be smart and don't try to be the hero. I don't need my linebackers to really be the hero. At least that's the way I see it. And my example of that is I've watched every minute of FSU football the first 2 weeks, and I can tell you that bad linebacker play can doom you. And I think I've seen enough of that watching those 2 games. So that's why I'm so heavy emphasis on the linebacker on the room this year as one of the positions, and probably the position the most on this entire team, that I've certainly circled and I'm zeroing in on to see how they perform from a week-to-week basis.
Yeah, and I think you're not the only UCF fan that is circling the linebackers and watching them. I think most of the time I was watching them the entire time last week, and you definitely saw there was a difference. Maybe it's the new year and there's a little bit more positivity. I could tell a difference between last year's week 1 to this year's week 1. There definitely is a little bit of a difference. We'll see if that kind of carries over, but I saw a little bit of a difference there. One thing to note, and I wanted to bring this up, their offensive line. They did, when I was watching the highlights and some of their game, the offensive line looked really physical. And, their coach, Coach Keeler, brought that up. He said, our offensive line played really physical, and I agree with him. Here's the negative. They returned all their starting offensive linemen, but their starting right tackle didn't play last week. I don't know if he's going to be out this week. I have no idea. I didn't go far into the injury report about, if he's going to play or not. I mentioned the sacks, and this is one of my keys to UCF victory. And if you're talking about a potential blowout fashion, this would be it. Rice sacked Sam Houston 7 times last week. 7. So though the line played physical, and they really dominated Rice's defensive line, like, no question, there's some leakage there. There's some leakage. And I think going up against this big UCF line, they didn't have any sacks last week, but as we talked about on the postgame, or I talked about on the postgame, and we talked about on the postgame show, the defensive line got to the quarterback. They got to the quarterback. The quarterback was getting the ball out quick. So behind a leaky offensive line, Nick, it is one thing getting to the quarterback, but you want to get rewarded for getting there. You want to get some sacks. You want to prove, like Ted Roof wants his guys to know that, hey, this is working. So is there a number? Knowing that Rice got to them 7 times last week, is there a number that you're like, I want the defense to get X amount of sacks just to prove that they're at the place they need to be heading into TCU?
I mean, I don't really have like a desired number necessarily, but I mean, do I want 0 again? No. I definitely don't want 0. I think everybody would agree with that one. But no, there's no number. I think, like I said, I think sort of during the post game show last week, like sacks are nice, but sacks are not all the same. Mm-hmm. There's coverage sacks. I mean, there's sometimes a quarterback will just straight up run into one. Like sacks are not the end all be all necessarily. It's just the consistent pressure that I think you want to see, and I think. Like I said, last week at times you got that a little bit from Malachi Lawrence and Nigel Kelly, and then when they did the rotations and went to some of the backups, I think you saw more of it from them, quite frankly, later in the game. But that's
Kevin Cole and Isaiah Nixon. They performed really well.
Cole and Isaiah Nixon, I think they popped a little better, but again, they came in later in the game when the offensive line was a little bit more worn down. So take that for what it's worth, but. I do think with the depth that UCF has at those positions, and even on the interior, because I mean, we mentioned it last week. Ricky Barber was constantly, I felt like, in the backfield making plays. Maybe Lee Hunter didn't show up as much, but I don't really have much concern there. Tyreek Robinson, we got a chance to see him last week. Thought he flashed as well, and then my boy Keyshawn Hudson.
Keyshawn Hudson,
big
Nick's new
boy.
favorite player.
Nick, he's my favorite player on this football team. I'm just telling you right now. Big boy was putting in work the other night. So, and hopefully we get a chance to see those guys again.
I think we will. For this game, but we'll give predictions after we talk about the Sam Houston defense. Starting off with their defensive coordinator, Skylar Cassidy, worked with Gus at Auburn. And what I found, Nick, we'll get a kick out of this. I went to the coach press conference on Zoom. And one of the first things the coach said was, I thought Gus, I don't know much. He called Gus Malzone, which I found, I chuckled. And he said he didn't know much about Gus, which I'm like, that is really rare for a college coach to not know Gus Malzahn. Usually any college coach you talk to knows Gus Malzahn, knows everything he's done. But he's like, I don't know much about Gus Malzahn, but I thought he was just gimmicky. I thought his offense was just gimmicky. But Skylar told me, and I watched the film, they're very fundamental. They're very disciplined. And I'm like, I think a lot of negative UCF fans would probably agree with you that he's very, very gimmicky. But I thought that was funny. But Skylar Cassidy running their defense. Defense looked really well.
I thought that was Keeler that said that. Was Cassidy that said that?
No. Keeler said it, but Cassidy told him, I guess, he preaches fundamentals. So he's like, oh, no, I watched the tape, and it was I found it funny that Keeler just openly said, I thought he was all gimmicks. So do not, last week somebody said, oh, would Gus, I forgot what comment it was, but they're like, oh, would Gus run up the score to prove something? I hope Gus heard that, because I know Gus would be like, okay, I don't care. We're going to put up 70 just for calling me gimmicky. But let's talk about the defense quickly. I liked how they played last week. Again, it's Rice. I don't know what you're getting out of Rice and E.J. Warner. We saw E.J. Warner when he was at Temple. Not very good, if we're being honest, but last season they actually had a good pass defense. I mean, they only allowed 231 yards through the air, which would have ranked near the top of Conference USA. They lost a couple of their top guys, one to the NFL, one transferred to, I think, New Mexico State is what I have. New Mexico State. Don't know why you transferred to New Mexico State, but listen, more power to you. They replaced a guy, DeMarcus Crosby, who transferred. He's a strong safety. They replaced him with Jalen Jimerson from Liberty. He was in the rotation at Liberty. They only had 17 sacks last season, which ranked at the bottom of the FCS. Don't know if that's going to change much against this UCF offensive line, but hey, who knows? They did have 2 sacks last week, so they're on pace to break that potentially. So good for them. A couple guys of note before I throw it to Nick, because I know Nick did watch a lot of the highlights and saw how the defense played. They're a very aggressive defense, which you kind of expect. Kavion Gaither, it's his fourth season. He's had 70-plus tackles the last 2 years, so that's a guy to kind of watch out for. And then their cornerback, Caleb Weaver, he had 10 tackles last game. Right. I'll let you talk about him, but I kind of looked at his stats last couple of years, watched a little bit of his past games. Really good corner. He's had a lot of tackles the last couple of years, which again, we know with corners, if you have a lot of tackles, that can be a good or bad thing. But they definitely use their corners to kind of come up a little bit and try to stop some of those runs from the running back and receivers. So kind of talk about their defense. Again, nothing pops off the page. They've replaced a lot of guys throughout the last couple of years. But talk about Sam Houston's defense real quick.
Yeah, you mentioned Caleb Weaver, and he was certainly the name that stood out when I was in the research process here. Did 10 tackles last week, played the safety position. He was a second all-conference USA team this season, preseason pick. So he's going to be a guy you got to look at in that secondary. And the other one is David Fisher, who had a pick six in the first half of that game last week for them as well. So you got two guys right there, quality players in the back end of their defense. And I do think that's going to be that's going to be one of my interesting things to see how UCF sort of matches up here, because 7-14, it can't happen again. No. It just can't happen again. If you have to come out of this game knowing a little bit more of what you have in KJ Jefferson, not only just him, but your receivers, your pass game in general. I don't think. I mean, win the game however you can, of course. If it's a dogfight, do what you can. But you have to be able to throw the football in the Big 12. You just do. I know that there's a lot of quality running backs in this league, but there's also a lot of really good quarterbacks in this league. And KJ Jefferson, certainly of all the quarterbacks in this conference, and again, it's only 1 week, he was one of those. He'd probably be ranked near the bottom for sure, for how he played in week 1, and he was playing one of the weaker teams that any team in the conference had to play. So you have to come out of this game having some familiarity with what you want to do offensively through the passing game and going into the Big 12 competition that way. So I know that's a long way of saying that there are some playmakers on this Sam Houston defense that could test you, but you shouldn't avoid it. You still have the more talented players, I think, on the perimeter. And you have a very aggressive play caller in Gus Malzahn, but sometimes that could be debated a little bit. But yeah, I think you do need to try to push it downfield and try to see what you have in KJ Jefferson before you get to Big 12 play.
Yeah, and that kind of leads into predictions and stuff, but I do want to kind of piggyback off that and talk a little bit about KJ. KJ is going to be a focal point. He's the quarterback. When John Rice was the quarterback, he was the focal point. UCF will, listen, no shocker here. We're picking UCF to win. We're picking UCF to win by a lot. We'll go over scores in a second. Okay. Don't throw wood on the fire now, all right? We don't need people coming in the comments.
I didn't say anything. I just made a noise.
I know. We talked about it last week. What do you need to see out of KJ to feel good? Clearly, we didn't see it. We didn't see it because we were talking for an entire post game, and I talked about it for our post game actual pod, how he just didn't look good. He didn't look good. He definitely was much better in the second half, got his confidence up a little bit, but he didn't throw the ball much. In a game like this, if you have another week 1 against Sam Houston, the expectations are going to take a hit. I don't care how you beat them. I don't care what the score is. I don't care how good you run the football. At the end of the day, when you get to Big 12 play, if teams don't think that KJ Jefferson can throw the football, you're just going to get 8 loaded every single time in the box, and they're going to say, KJ, we're going to put one-on-one against your receivers, even if the receivers are better, which, no offense to any other Big 12 team, most of the time, Kobe Hudson and Xavier Townsend is going to be better than the opposing corner. There's only a couple times in the year where that's not the case. They're going to dare him. They're going to say, we want you to throw it. So you need to come out on Sam Houston. We know you can run the ball on Sam Houston. You're going to be able to go for 500 yards against Sam Houston. That's not an exaggeration. If they really wanted to, they could. You can keep the play calling vanilla. You can. But keep the play calling vanilla and call some pass plays to get him in a groove. So he can get that confidence before a big-time game that really a lot of people are nervous on in TCU.
Yeah, you cannot hide the quarterback. If you hide you can hide the quarterback against New Hampshire. I think you can hide the quarterback against Sam Houston. I don't think you can hide the quarterback against TCU on the road. And I don't think you can hide the quarterback in any other game you play in the rest of the season, quite frankly. Maybe Colorado. Their defense is not great. I digress. Yeah. But no, you can't hide KJ. You have to find some sort of balance. I'm not saying I want you to throw more than run. Absolutely not. I said last week, if KJ Jefferson's throwing 40 times in a football game, you're probably not going to win most of those games. But does the gap need to be 54 runs to 14 passes? No. It doesn't need to be that. It may call for that in certain situations, and if you just completely are inept at throwing the football midway through the year and literally all you can do is run the ball, then yeah, things will change. But ideally, you don't want that to happen. KJ Jefferson is your quarterback. You went and got him from the portal. I'm going to assume that getting paid a lot of money by this not this university necessarily, but through the NIL, obviously, to be the starting quarterback for UCF. So you have a lot of equity built in him, and this is his last year of college football, all those things. Like, eventually he's going to have to do his part. He just has to. Because last week was not pretty, and against the opponent and everything, like we've been saying, not to sound like a broken record, last week was just not up to par, and I appreciate that, he took responsibility for it. He seemed really bothered by it. He looked like he had nerves in that game, which, again, is a little odd for a quarterback with his experience and a guy who played in many pressure-packed situations in the SEC. But, it's one thing you hope he gets together before we get to next weekend.
And I'll say this, a couple things. Number one, there can be something. I love that UCF fans, after the night where there was a lot of negativity, a lot of UCF fans, and I was shocked to see this, were very like, it's 1 week. Like, let's wait, which is not usually normal. So I appreciate seeing that. And in terms of KJ being nervous, yeah, I think he gave really good answers about wanting to prove himself to a bunch of new people and wanting to put on a good show for people. And I think, that ultimately hurt him. And I think he said once he realized, okay, I'm just having fun. I'm not trying to raise my draft stock. I'm just trying to have fun. Right. That's when it kind of clicked, and he performed a lot better. After that interception, I think it clicked. Now, when it clicked, it's not like he was throwing the ball all over the field. UCF just ran all over. So I'll take the answer, and I appreciate the answers he gave, and I'll take the answer from Gus saying he clicked in at that point. But you ran the ball. So I'll take the week one. We'll take it for what it is. It was bad. But at the end of the day, Mackenzie Milton had a bad game against SC State many years ago and a really good season. And nobody remembers that game. So as long as from here on out, it doesn't need to be perfect. We said it just needs to be an average passer. Because with this run game, with this offensive line, we think you're going to put up points on anybody. You just need to be able to make the throws when you are tasked to make the throws.
Right. And it's one of those things too with the transfer portal is yes, Jakari is there, and he has a little bit of starting experience, and we got to see him a little bit in that first game. But when you go into the transfer portal, the scary part about it is sometimes you don't really know how they're all going to mesh together until you see them all on the field for the first time. That's number one. And number two, and you don't make this call. Obviously, we don't have enough evidence to make this determination. We're going to see how this plays out as the season goes on. I'm just mainly pointing this part out here is when you go into the transfer portal and you miss, you're just sort of stuck for a whole year. So that's the dangers of it. Again, we have a lot to go into this season to figure this all out. I'm not trying to bury KJ Jefferson and tell you that, hey, he's not going to have better days in a UCF uniform. He absolutely will. I think actually he is going to take a step forward in this game. And I think they're eventually going to figure something out. I think this offense has too many playmakers all over it I think Gus Malzahn is too experienced as a play caller for them not to get something out of KJ Jefferson this season.
We'll go into it then, Nick. What kind of give your thoughts on the game, give your prediction, and how much better you think KJ Jefferson will look on Saturday.
Yeah, like I said there, I think he improves in this game. Hopefully he's settled down a little bit after getting that first taste of action, and just give him some easy throws. And I'd like to see them try to get the ball into the hands of Xavier Townsend a little bit more. I think we saw how electric he was on punt returns and things like that. I mean, I know that the killer said about the whole gimmick comment, right? Hell, it might be the time to get a little gimmicky, because in terms of just trying to get him some easy completions, I mean, in literally, if you go back to last game, 2 of those 7 completions were the same play, I think, run one to Miles Montgomery and the other one to, was it RJ, the other one who got the...
Johnny.
It was Johnny, right? Yeah, it was Johnny and Miles on those 2 pass plays, and that took up 2 of his 7 completions, and both went for scores, or almost scores. I can't even remember anymore. My brain is completely just scattered at the moment. You got to help me out though. I can't remember which one went for a touchdown anymore.
They both went for touchdowns. This is the wheel route to Miles, wheel route to Johnny, which now UCF will not be able to use that play for at least 10 weeks. No. Because everybody's going to be like, well, that's the only play as of right now that KJ can throw touchdowns on. So you can't run the wheel route anymore. But
no, I tell you, it's like an NCAA. You take it right off like the recruiting list. You hit a triangle or whatever it is, and it just wipes it away. But thank you for helping me out, because there were so many touchdowns scored, I can't even remember anymore. Which ones went in.
I got you.
Anyway, I think UCF wins this football game. What was the bet? The exact number on the over under here? It's down to 21 points.
Oh.
Down to 21. It opened up as a 25, and now it's down to 21. So it's dropping. So a lot of money going in on Sam Houston there. I am going UCF gets the win 38-17, which by my math, that's right at 21.
So that'd be a push. Is it actually 21, not even a half?
21.
So yeah. Okay, so
I'm just going with a straight push. But the thing is, it's like I didn't even know the betting thing until right before we got on. And this was already the score I had earmarked. So there you go.
I'm going to go a little bit higher. I have a little bit more confidence. I agree with you. I think me and you are kind of on the same wavelength. I think KJ's going to have a way better performance. Not just that he needs to, or not just because we want him to, because he needs to. He needs to have a better performance. And I think watching Gus on the sideline last week, he was not happy. I think they are going to make sure they set him up. It's just like you could talk about a lot of quarterbacks. Some quarterbacks just need a little bit of confidence. And I think the beginning part of that game was just so rough. I think the focal point for Gus and staff is like, we're going to need this guy to win games moving forward. So we need to give him some confidence. So I expect KJ to have a really good game. I'm surprised the spread was only 21. I get it. Like I said, we talked highly of Sam Houston. I think this is a much bigger step up than New Hampshire. I'm going to go 41-13. 41-13. I do think they put up a score and a couple field goals. I think this is going to... I'm more intrigued. I think there's two different things to this game, Nick. I think we're intrigued to see KJ, but I think we're really intrigued to see, can the defense keep that same level? Because if you remember last year, we did have Boise State in between the Villanova and Kent State game. But when we went to the Villanova game, they played good, but they still gave up yards. The defense still gave up some yardage. Villanova put up 14. And you were confident about the defense, but you're like, how did they allow some leakage? So I'm saying 13 because it's a safe pick. You would obviously like, though, another New Hampshire where you just roll over the team and prove that you are just in a much improved position than you were last year.
Well, I mean, obviously that'd be great. I think the New Hampshire team you saw last week and this Sam Houston team it couldn't be any more different. Like, I think if Sam Houston played New Hampshire, I think they'd crush them too. So
I agree.
That's why, and I think because of the players we've sort of outlined and what they can bring to you a little bit offensively on the perimeter, I'm going to give them a little bit more respect, and that's why I got them scoring at least 2 touchdowns in this football game. And
I'm
but
close to it.
those might come at the end, though.
Yeah, I said 13.
I didn't tell you when they were going to happen. I just told you that they're going to score 2.
Yeah, I don't think it's relatively close. I think UCF wins by a good chunk. I would take, if I'm a betting man, I would take UCF plus the points. But that's just me. Don't listen to me. Do what you feel is right for you. I'm really liking the 7 sacks, though. When I saw that, I said, I'm excited for our defensive line this game. I think they're going to show out and they're going to feast because, again, no offense to Rice. I think if Rice saw
Hudson, man.
I think he's going to be, let's make, I bet he gets a sack. And we will go crazy, not in the press box. We'll go crazy on the field after for Mr. Hudson. But all right, everybody, that's going to do it for this preview episode of Charge On. Please follow me and Nick on Twitter. We are going to be going live, just like last week, for the pregame show and postgame show with Steven Leonard. Hopefully this week, much better technical things. I've been working around the clock this week trying to get that figured out. But I will say the postgame show, there was not really many tech problems. I rewatched it back. We looked pretty decent, Nick. The HD was working. Went a little grainy a couple times, but it was working all good. But we will be back. So make sure you subscribe, like, share, do all that you do. We greatly appreciate it. And let's hope that UCF can go 2-0 and in dominating fashion, because I don't want to be negative again. Negative Sean, I like to put him in a box for most of the year. We like to be positive around here. Nick, any final thoughts before we head on out?
Nope, not really. Just look forward to getting back over to Orlando there on Saturday and be another long night. It'll be another long night, but excited to get down to it.
It will be, but then we get a little bit of a week off, not going on the road. So we'll take a couple weeks off to recalibrate before a big meaty part of the schedule happens. All right, everybody, that's going to do it. This has been Charge On, presented by BetOnline. We will see you on Saturday.